Welcome everyone. In the last session we have discussed in detail how the statement of financial position is prepared. I believe you have gone through the format and the items that has to be shown in their respective sites. So let us discuss a practical case in order to get a clear picture regarding how the statement of financial position, or otherwise we can simply say a balance sheet is prepared as per the INDAS compliance. So next case. From the following ledger balances of Ala Products Limited as on 31/3/2018, prepare its balance sheet. So items is given. I hope you all know the contents of the question. See, all these items either related to any one of the key elements of the final accounts. First one, goodwill. We know what is meant by goodwill and where it has to be recorded. Computer software. Computer software actually comes under other intangible assets. Capital reserve, security premiums comes under the reserves and surplus. General reserve also comes under the heads reserves. Patent rights is another intangible asset. Land and building, furniture, plant and machinery, they are fixed asset. Surplus comes under reserves and surplus. Debentures under non-current liabilities. Trade payables, current liabilities. Provision for employee benefits comes under the other benefits to the employees category. Investment in government securities comes under investments. Long-term loans, make sure what is the balance given, whether it is a credit balance or a debit balance. Here it is a debit balance, so it can be considered as asset. Trade receivable asset, receivables, other current assets is also another current asset that actually comes under the head trade receivables itself. Inventories, cash in hand, cash in bank, deferred tax liabilities, unpaid dividend, income received in advance. One is outstanding, another is received prepaid or received in advance. And finally, authorized capital of the company is 1 lakh equity shares of 10 each, of which 50,000 shares were issued. So this is how a typical question where you are asked to prepare the statement of financial position alone. So let us begin with the statement of financial position. First of all, you need to give the name of the concern. After that, title of the statement which you are going to prepare. As per the INDAS complaints, you have to write the title of the statement as statement of financial position. But you can either write balance sheet as on the last date given in the question. And the format consists of particulars, note number, figures at the end of current year and figures at the end of previous year. Simply means current year balance in this column and last year balance in this column. Usually in the question they will give amount relating to the current period. If there is any other amount, it will be specifically mentioned that certain balance relating to the previous year. In that case, you can show that amount in the second column also. Anyway, let us continue with it. And note number, I will discuss about why the note number column comes in a finance statement of financial position and why we are preparing, how we are going to prepare. So let's continue with the case. We will begin with assets. You can either begin with assets or liabilities. As per our schedule, let us begin with assets. And in the assets, you have to begin with fixed assets, but from our syllabus point of view, we will be using the term non-current assets. Let us learn like that. So first one, non-current assets. The non-current assets. So before you answer the question, first of all, you should keep in mind the format for presenting the statement of financial position. You should familiarize clearly what are the contents of the statement of financial position. You have to identify the non-current assets under that head. How many items are there? So learn thoroughly what are the items comes under various heads. It will be much easier for answering the question, because if you are trying to pinpoint each item in the question in the state and trying to bring those items in respective statements, you will get confused, because when you see each item, because all the items will not be given in a particular order, it will be mixed up. See, here goodwill, it comes under goodwill category under non-current assets, and after that equity capital, then security premium, after patent right again land and building. So the procedure or the pattern of presenting the details in the question is not in the order of the statement of financial position. So if you go on taking each item and recording in the respective order, you will get confused. So it's better to have a clear idea about what are the contents of non-current assets. Remember those items. First of all, first item is property, plant and equipment. Is that item is there in the question? You have to think like that, and then answer the question accordingly. That will be much better. You will not miss any of the items, or you will not get any mistakes. That is the easiest way. That's my suggestion. You can follow any pattern as you like. So first of all, non-current assets, it begins with property, plant and equipment. Make sure whether there is any property, plant and equipments given in the question. So in this question, there is no item directly given as property, plant and equipments. We know property, plant and equipments mainly consist of fixed assets. So go for the fixed assets given in the question. There are many items: land and building, furniture, plant, and there are no other items. So how you are going to answer that one means whether you are going to write writing it down or pinpointing each item in the financial statement, or are you going to get the total of the fixed assets. So for that, the thing is, you need to write down the title of all these items, that is property, plant and equipment, as per the statement of financial position. So the contents of property, plant and equipments, you have to identify those items separately. For that, you will be writing notes. So for supporting each of these items, if there are more than one item that comes under any of the heads, you need to write down notes. So that is accompanying notes. First one, property, plant and equipment. How many items are there? 3 items. So identify the 3 items: land and building, furniture, plant and machinery. So take the total, you will get 7,30,000. And show the 7,30,000 in the respective column C. And see, you can see that in the node number column you have written 1. So what is meant by 1? In this question, our first note or first calculation or first working note with regard to any of the item was property, plant and equipment. So in the accompanying notes, the first one is property, plant and equipment, and 7,30,000 is obtained from the first accompanying note. That is the meaning of writing, or what is the purpose of writing note number column and the number itself is to identify how the 7,30,000 comes in this question. Because if you go through the question directly, you can't find an item as 7,30,000, because you have got the 7,30,000 by adding together more than 1 or 2 items. So in order to find how the 7,30,000 obtained, you are noting down the first accompanying note as the note number in the statement of financial position. So this is how you have to present a statement of financial position. So next one, after that, goodwill, it is directly given in the question, 1 lakh. After goodwill, there is another item, other intangible assets, and go through the question whether there is only one other intangible asset or more than one intangible asset. If there is more than one item comes under a particular head, it is better to write accompanying notes. So then the second accompanying notes, we can say other intangible assets. So now identify how many other intangible assets are there. One is computer software, another one patent right. So there are no other intangible assets as per the details given in the question. So write down the 2 items, 1,30,000 and 60,000, total 1,90,000. So show the amount 1,90,000 under other intangible assets, 1,90,000. It was the second note under the working notes. So show the number 2 in the note number. So this is how you have to present the financial statement whenever you are given a trial balance or a balances of various items. After other intangible, let us go for the next heading, financial assets. So I believe you have gone through the format with regard to the statement of financial position. Familiarize the heads that comes under statement of financial position. Not only the heads, the contents of each head you have to familiarize. So in this question, financial assets comprises of some items, and identify those items in the question. If there is more than one financial asset item, you have to write down the note. So next item, financial assets. Under financial assets, first one is investment. So with regard to investment, there is only one item, that is investment in government securities, 1 lakh. So write down to 1 lakh. Show it under the head financial asset. First one, 1 lakh. It was a third working note, so we have given number 3. Next one, under financial assets, another one, long-term loans. Long-term loans is directly given 60,000, and I believe you all know why the long-term loans is shown under an asset. I have mentioned the reason for showing the long-term assets in the asset side, and how you identify an item as a non-current asset and a current asset. It will be mentioned in the question. Since it is a long-term loan, in the question answer itself, in the item itself specifying the period of the loan, long-term loans will be usually for a period of 5 years or more than 5 years. So definitely it is a non-current asset. So non-current asset 60,000. So next head, we are going for current assets. There may be many items under the statement of financial position format, and since those items are not given in the question, we are considering only those items that is given directly or directly specified in the question. So next one, current assets. There might be more than one item under current assets. First, let us begin with first heading, inventories. It is directly given, inventories 1 lakh. Next one, after inventories, next category is financial assets. Under financial assets, there are many items. Identify those financial assets. First one is trade receivables. It is directly given in the question, 10,000. After that, there are no other items. We can find only cash. So next, for cash in the question, there is 2 items, cash in hand and cash at bank. So let us add together all these items, and we can write cash and cash equivalents. So next item, cash and cash equivalents, 50,000. It is done as a 4th note in the accompanying notes category. So we will given number 4. So I believe we have recorded all the items that is specified in the question that comes under the asset category. Let us go to the next one, liabilities. So before we go into liability, remember you have to take the total of the asset side. So the total of assets, if you add together all these values, you will get 13,40,000. Once you complete the asset side, you have to go for the liability side. Liability side begins with equity and liability. It will be given as a main heading in the liability side, equity and liability. So first of all, we will begin with equity. Under equity, you have to be very careful. In the question, authorized capital of the company is 1 lakh, equity shares of 10 each, of which 50,000 shares were issued. We have learned about the shares and debentures in detail in the previous modules, and we know how to present the share capital details in the balance sheet. It is not a single item. It has to be dealt separately, unlike other items in the balance sheet, because share capital can be classified into authorized capital, issued capital, subscribed capital, called up capital, paid up capital. I believe you all know these items, but while preparing statement of financial position, if there is any details regarding authorized capital, issued capital, subscribed, called up, paid up, if there is any information regarding any of these, you have to show each item separately. If there is authorized capital, show it, and after that adjust the issued capital, after that subscribed, after that called up, paid up. So whatever information given regarding the equity capital or share capital, you have to show all these items. If there is no other information regarding any of these categories of capital, you can directly show equity capital, whatever amount given in the question. Since in the question authorized capital and issued capital is specifically mentioned, you have to show it in the statement of financial position. And while showing it in the financial position, don't add together all these values, because authorized capital, there is a reason for or meaning for authorized capital, and issued capital also there is a meaning for issued capital. We have learned in detail all these category, so it has to be presented accordingly. Let me show it. First one, equity capital. First one, authorized capital. 1 lakh equity shares of 10 is, that means 10 lakhs capital was the company's plan to raise. But out of 10 lakh, the company issued only 50,000 shares, that is 5 lakh rupees worth of shares. So, since there are no information regarding subscribed, called up and paid up, you can directly write issued, subscribed and called up, because it was the issued amount and the same was subscribed and same was called up, and finally the same was paid up. That is the assumption. Otherwise, if there is any other change in the value, it could have been mentioned in the question. So issued, subscribed and called up can be written as 50,000 shares, because it is directly mentioned here. 50,000 equity shares of 10 each, 5 lakh. And in the statement of financial position, don't add this 10 lakh and 5 lakhs, because the 10 lakh was the amount the company was planning to raise, but the company issued only 5 lakh worth of equity shares, so you can show only 5 lakhs. So in the statement, under equity share capital 5 lakhs. If you have gone through the module shares, issue of shares with regard to the company's account, that module, if you have gone through those theoretical and practical cases, it is not a issue for you guys. It is a very easy part. So 5 lakhs. After that, under equity, there is another item, other equity, that comprises of reserves and surplus. In that case, you have to be very careful. Last class we have mentioned how to find out the amount of reserves and surplus. There is a certain format is there, and what are the types of reserves and surplus values that has to be considered while finding out the amount of other equity. So let us do the working note. Other equity, we will begin with reserves. In the reserves, you have to add any type of reserves that is given in the question, and also security premiums. If there is any premiums given in the question, it has to be added. So in the question, there is capital reserve and there is general reserve and there is security premium. So add all these items. After that, another details given is surplus. It is directly given 70,000. Since there are no other items that has to be deducted, add together all these, you will get 2,80,000. So just show the amount 2,80,000 and show the working note number. So next heading is liabilities itself. Under liabilities, two main category, non-current liabilities and current liabilities. First of all, we begin with non-current liabilities. Under non-current liability, first item is financial liabilities. Under financial liabilities, there are certain categories, and in the question there are certain examples or categories that has to be considered or mentioned under financial liabilities. First one is long-term borrowings, and it can be under long-term borrowings. One is 8% debentures, and there are no other further items, that is 3 lakhs. That has to be shown here. Long-term borrowings 7, as a working note 7, 3 lakhs. After that, next one is deferred tax liabilities, 1,20,000. And next one, provisions. So we have to show provision separately because there is only one item, provision for employee benefit, that comes under the provision. So let us show it separately. Long-term provisions, provision for employees benefit 70,000, it has to be shown as long-term provision 70,000. And we have recorded all the long-term liabilities, or we can say non-current liabilities or fixed liabilities. Next one, current liabilities. Go from the beginning of the item, check each item, make sure whether any of these items comes under the current liabilities. Under current liabilities, first one is financial liabilities. Under financial liabilities, go through all these items whether there is any item that comes under the financial liability. First one, yes, trade payables 60,000. And after that, there are next categories, other current liabilities. Make sure whether there are any more current liabilities given in the question. Unpaid dividend and income received and advance. These two items cannot be shown in any of the heads that comes under the current liabilities. So we can show that under other current liabilities. So you have to write down another note, other current liabilities, that includes unpaid dividend 3,000 and income received in advance 7,000. So 10,000, it has to be shown here. So right now we have recorded almost all the items specified in the question. Now take the total of liabilities. If you are getting the same amount as the total of assets, your computation was correct. If there is any difference with regard to the amount given or amount you have found in the total assets and the amount you found under the total liabilities, if there is any difference, it may be a careless mistake. Go through each item, see if you have missed or written anything wrong. So this is how you have to prepare a statement of financial position. You have learned a format where there are number of items mentioned and we have discussed in detail each of these items. It doesn't mean that in the question you will come across a case where you have to deal with all those items. But you should have an idea about all the items of the format, then only you can deal with a question that comes in a university exam. So first of all, you have to familiarize what is the format of statement of financial position. What are the contents of this financial position? Then you try to answer these questions. I believe you have understand the pattern and how this statement has to be prepared. Let us go to the next area. A statement of profit and loss. We have learned about preparation of financial statements or final accounts, in which we have begun with trading profit and loss. After that we will go for the balance sheet. So as per the IND-AS compliance or the IND-AS standards, we have learned how to prepare a statement of financial position or otherwise known as balance sheet. So here we are going to learn how the statement of profit and loss account or profit and loss, instead of account we have to use the term statement of profit and loss, or earlier you have learned that how a trading profit and loss account is prepared or how we are going to prepare it. It is known as SOPL. So we are not going further into the details of the statement. We all know it is an income expenditure trade statement in which we will write down all the expenses and all incomes and identify whether the business has earned sufficient profit or loss. That is a typical pattern for the preparation of a trading profit and loss. But in statement of profit and loss, it will specifically use a pattern where you can identify from what all sources from which we have earned income and for what all areas in which we have spent their income, and ultimately whether the business has earned sufficient profit or not. And after identifying the profit, how much is the earnings that is offered to the owners of the concern or equity shareholders. We know that there are more than 1 lakh equity shareholders, or there will be more than 100 equity shareholders, or there may be 1000 equity shareholders. Whatever the situation of the business, we know that there are more than 1 equity shareholders. So what is the amount that arises out of profit is offered or is going to be provided to the each individual equity shareholders or owners? We can easily identify that details from the preparation of statement of profit and loss. But in the case of a trading profit and loss, we can simply identify whether the business has earned sufficient profit or not. But in the statement of profit and loss, it has opened a wide area for identifying what is the performance of the business as well as the earnings offered to each individual owners. So let us identify what is the pattern for presentation of a statement of profit and loss. So before we go further deep into the details of the statement of profit and loss, see, just like the final accounts, this is also a single statement. See, it is a single continuous statement consisting of incomes in the first half, after that expenses in the following pattern, after that how the profit is distributed to the shareholders. All these comprises in a single statement. But for the discussion, we will be dividing the statement into two halves. One half consists of expenses and other half consists of how the incomes, and other half consists of expenses, like that. So don't consider it as a two-page statement. It is actually a one single statement because of the space constraint, because we can't write down all the items in a single piece of paper. We will continue it to the next page. So don't consider it as a two different statements. It is actually one single statement. So let us go in detail each of these items. So here we will have one part of the statement. It consists of, just like the columns which we have learned in the case of a statement of financial position or a balance sheet, particulars, note number. I believe you know what is the purpose of note number column, so I am not going to explain it again. For next column is figures as at the end of the current reporting period. That means you have to show the current year amounts. And figures as at the end of the previous reporting period means figures relating to the previous period. If it is mentioned in the question, you have to show it. In almost all the cases, you will be given, or you may come across a question where only the current year balances will be given. So first of all, we will begin with incomes. If you go through any of the statements that is written or shown in any of the author's text or in any of the publications, you will see that it will begin with revenues. That is the pattern, unlike the statement which you have learned in the previous case. Because in the previous case means statement of financial positions, in some text it will begin with assets, some text it will begin with liabilities. So whatever the pattern, the answer will be the same. But in this case, you have to begin with revenues. There is no change with regard to that. First one, revenue from operations. So revenue from operations means what is the main business activity that is conducted. The company may conduct any sale of goods or services, or what is providing any consultancy services, whatever it is. Revenue from operations mainly means sale of goods and services, or we can simply say it consists of sale of products or sale of services and other operating revenues. So the pattern will be like this. Sales, if given in the question, take the sales. If there is any other operating income that is specifically mentioned in the question, add along with the sales. Remember, you have to deduct the excise duty from the sales in order to identify the net sales during the year. And after that, you have to consider another item. In the question, they may specify the type of business. Usually that will come across in rare situations. But remember, whenever you are dealing or facing a question like this, read the question very wisely. Because if the question is relating to any finance concern means providing loans or accepting deposits, such kind of companies. If you are asked to prepare a statement of profit and loss of a finance company, the revenue from the operations of that particular company includes interest from deposits and other financial services. So if there is if you are dealing with a question where you are asked to prepare the statement of profit and loss of a finance company, apart from the sale, operating income and excise duty, there will be items like interest from deposit and other income from other financial services. Instead of they are giving items like sales and operating income, they might give income from interest and other income from other financial services. So if it is a financing company or financial company, that items will be the revenue from operations. Usually that will be a rare case, but anyway you have to go through the question very wisely. So first part is over, revenue from operations. Next one, other income. So other income includes interest income. Interest income is actually, see, now you may get confused because interest income is considered as an other income in almost all the company except for financing company, because financing company's main operation is providing loans, accepting deposit. So income from interest is actually the income of a financing company, that is revenue from operation. That was the explanation I was trying to give. So now we are discussing the general concept. Other income includes interest income, any income that is obtained by way of dividend, and other non-operating incomes. So these are the items that comes under other incomes. So that is only aspect with regard to the statement of profit and loss. With regarding to the income side, there is only two items. So take the total of the incomes. After that we will go for the expenses. From that onwards there are many items that has to be considered cautiously. So first one, expenses. Under expenses, first one is cost of material consumed. Cost of material consumed simply means cost of production. So what is the cost that incurred by a businessman for producing their material? So there is an equation for finding out the cost of material consumed, that is opening stock plus purchases minus closing stock, you will get cost of material consumed. If it is given directly in the question, you can directly write down the amount in the respective column. Otherwise, if you have come across a question where opening stock, purchases and closing stock is given, you have to give that amount. Next one, purchase of stock in trade. It refers to purchase of goods intended for reselling without further processing. Such an item will be given specifically mentioned, so write down in their respective column. Next one, change in inventories of finished goods or stock in trade or work in progress. Adjustments for change in inventory, that is the difference between the opening stock and closing stock, are given under this head. This head. If closing stock is less than the opening stock, the amount of decrease is shown as a positive adjustment. On the other hand, if closing stock is more than the opening stock, the amount of increase is shown as a negative adjustment. I believe you didn't understand any sentence that I have mentioned about that particular head. The concept is, under this head you have to show the difference between the opening stock and closing stock value. Definitely in the question, the opening stock amount and the closing stock amount will not be same. There will be different. One may be high or one may be bigger than the other. So there is a factor that has to be considered, is that there is a simple equation regarding how to find the positive value or a negative value. So in the question, opening stock will be given, so write down the opening stock and its amount. From that you have to deduct the closing stock, you will get closing stock will be given. And I am not going to mention whether the opening stock is a bigger value or a closing stock is a bigger value. You are first writing down the opening stock, because opening stock is the first item. After that, closing stock is the last item, so write down it as a second. If you take the difference, you will get a negative amount or a positive amount. If the opening stock is a bigger value, you will get a positive amount. We all know that is basic maths. If you get if the opening stock is a lesser value or a smaller value than a closing stock, definitely you will get a negative value. So take the difference. If you get a positive value, show here the positive value, that is either plus the amount. If you get a negative value, write down the negative value, that is minus that value. But in the statement, it is better to use brackets for the negative value rather than writing down plus and minus. Don't worry, we will come to that area regarding how the change in stock has to be considered. Remember, instead of writing plus and minus, write down the value alone. If it is a positive value or if it is a negative value, show that amount within brackets. That is the main concept. That is only with regard to the change in inventory. In the theoretical part, they will mention many things. Don't get worried about it. The thing is, take the difference. If you are getting a negative value, show the negative value. If you are getting a positive value, show the positive value. So that is with regard to change in inventory. Next one, employees benefit expenses. Employees benefit expenses means all the benefits that has to be provided to the employee by us. So actually for us it is an expense. So what are the expense or employee benefits that has to be offered? See, employee benefit expense consists of short-term benefits, otherwise known as short-term employee benefits. The short-term employee benefits includes wages, salaries, social security contributions, paid annual leaves and sick leave, profit sharing and bonuses and non-monetary benefits. That comes under the short-term benefits. Post-employment benefits means after their service or after their retirement, benefits offered after their retirement. So post-employment benefits includes retirement benefits like pension, gratuity, etc., and other post-employment benefits like life insurance, Medicare, and contributory pensions. Next one, other long-term benefits. Long-term benefits means long-term paid absences, other long-term service benefits, long-term disability benefits, profit sharing and bonuses, and deferred remuneration. And finally, termination benefits. Sometimes some employees may have to be terminated from the business, maybe due to any issues or any policies of the concern. Anyway, at the time of termination, it includes salary to be paid until the end of the specified notice period. So these are the benefits that has to be provided to our employees, and these comes under the category employee benefit expenses. So these are the subcategories. Familiarize each of these subcategories and what are the contents under subcategories. Next one, finance cost. Finance cost refers to the cost incurred for borrowing money to meet the financial requirements of the company. A company raises money by issuing debentures and borrowing from banks and other financial institutions, and the main financial cost items includes interest on loan. Next one, gain on loss on the foreign currency transaction. If our business is dealing with other business companies or other businesses from the outside countries, there might be any profit or loss with regard to those transactions. Next one, dividend on redeemable preference shares when the company has no discretion over payment of the dividend. It will be, these items will be specifically mentioned in the question. So you just familiarize the item and show it is in the respective column. And other borrowing cost. So all these items will be directly mentioned in the question. You need to find out the item and show in the respective heads. So that is the contents that comes under the finance cost. Next one is depreciation and amortization expense. I believe you all know what is meant by depreciation and amortization. I have mentioned about this case while explaining the statement of financial position. Depreciation is the reduction in the value of the fixed assets, and amortization is the reduction in the value of the intangible assets. Actually, these two items are an expense for the concern. Next one, other expenses. It includes all those items that cannot be considered under any of the previous heads. Examples are consumption of stores and spare parts, power and fuel, rent, amount paid for rent, for telephone charges, repairs, insurance, rate and tax. Right, tax means not considering the income tax. All other taxes except the income tax, because in the computation of income tax is going to be dealt in the coming after the finding out the profit. There is a computation for tax expenses. So here under other expenses we will consider all the taxes except income tax. That is to be considered very carefully. So these are the aspects with regard to expenses. So write down the total of expenses, and remember while taking the total, don't add the items from the revenue from operations because it is already computed here. So you have to consider from the amount from cost of material consumed, add together all these items, find out the total. From the next items onwards, there are only computation. You need not have to find the item from the question. Next one, profit or loss from exceptional items and tax. Profit of loss before exceptional items means items that are not occurring in the business activities in a regular basis, such as cost of restructuring, cost of disposal of items of fixed asset, cost of legislative changes from various particular aspects, cost of litigation. There are many items with regard to that. So before adjusting those exceptional items, in the question they will specifically mention about the exceptional items. So before adjusting these exceptional items, what is the profit or loss from that particular business? That is the difference between total income and total expenses. So total income minus total expenses, you will get profit or loss before adjusting the exceptional items. So it will be either profit or loss. After that, next one, exceptional items. It may be given in the question. There are two heads that has to be, that comes under profit and loss. It is exceptional items and some situation extraordinary items. It will be mentioned in the question. We will discuss about that area while discussing the case study regarding these areas. So if there is any exceptional items, you have to consider those exceptional items from profit and loss and show the profit and loss before tax. Here we will show the profits after considering exceptional item. Usually there will not be any exceptional items given in the question, but we can't say that there will not be any exceptional item. There might come or not. So prepare for that. See, after exceptional item, next one is profit and loss before tax, because we haven't dealt with the income tax until now. So here you will get a value after adjusting exceptional items if there is any given in the question. So here you will write the profit and loss before adjusting the tax. That is why it is given profit and loss before tax. And while computing tax, there are two types of tax. One is current tax and other is deferred tax. Current tax means this is the amount of income tax to be payable in respect of taxable income calculated as per Income Tax Act for a particular period. It will be mentioned in the question directly. Write down the amount. Next one, deferred tax is the tax effect of the timing difference. Timing difference are defined as differences between taxable income and accounting income for a period that originate in one period and are capable of reversal in one or more subsequent period. The amount of taxable income, I believe you all know what is meant by taxable income. That is income on tax which are calculated, may be different from the income or profit as disclosed by the statement of profit and loss. If the accounting income is more than the taxable income, deferred tax, being tax on accounting income minus tax on taxable income, is shown as an expense in the statement of profit or loss. If the taxable income is more than the accounting income, the deferred tax is shown as a negative figure. We have learned about the deferred tax in the theoretical aspect. It may be either positive value or a negative value. We will come to the deferred tax details, or how the positive value or negative value or whatever it is, how the deferred tax has to be dealt. We will discuss about that area while dealing a practical case relating to a deferred tax case. Because if I explain the deferred tax now, I have to repeat the same at the time of practical case discussion also. So we will discuss. Remember, after adjusting the exceptional case, you have to adjust tax. Under tax, there are two types of tax: current tax and deferred tax. Next one, profit or loss for the period from the continuing operations. That is the amount which you have find after adjusting tax. Next one, profit and loss from discontinued operations. And my business might have dealing with any other operation. So the discontinued operation is defined, or meaning is the company might have conducting more than one ventures, and the company might dealing with one venture in a going concern pattern, and another, the company may be either discontinuing another activity or a venture, or it may be terminating other activity or a venture. So during the period, if it has discontinued any of the activity, for example, the statement is prepared by the end of the period, and by June or July the company has terminated or discontinued or limited the activity of any of one branch or a venture. You have to identify the profit and loss of that particular item or a particular branch or a venture until the termination date or until the discontinued date. That has to be shown here. Usually this item may not be given in the question, but if you come across such an item, you have to show it. So that is with regard to profit and loss from discontinuing operations. And profit or loss from discontinuing operations has to be shown separately in the statement of profit and loss, and tax payable or tax credits available on profit or loss of a discontinued operation should also be disclosed in the statement of profit and loss. That is as per theoretical aspects. So let us go to next one. Other expenses, we have discussed about those other expenses. And exceptional items, we have discussed about exceptional item. These are the examples of exceptional item: cost of restructuring, cost of disposal of items of fixed assets, cost of legislative changes, and cost of litigation statements, and or reversal of provision. These items should be directly given, so you can easily identify that. Next one, we haven't completed our statement. See, we have to do a lot. Next one, tax expenses of discontinued operation. If there is any items with regard to discontinued operation, it has to be mentioned here. Next one, profit or loss from the discontinued operations. If there is any items with regard to discontinued operation, you have to find out whether it is profit or loss. And finally, we are getting the profit and loss of the company for the period. That means company means if the company is dealing with more than one ventures, or if it is dealing with more than one branches. One is a continuing pattern and another is in a termination pattern. Whatever it is, we have to show the total profit and loss of the entire business here. Next one, after finding out the total profit and loss or profit or loss during the period, next heading is other comprehensive income. So what is meant by other comprehensive income? Other comprehensive income refers to items of income and expenses that are not recognized as a part of the statement of profit or loss. Revenues, expenses, gains and losses appears in other comprehensive income when they have not yet been realized. Something has been realized when the underlying transaction has been completed, such as when an investment is sold. When the company invests in bonds and the value of those bonds changes, the gain or loss is recognized under other comprehensive income. That is a very simple example of other comprehensive income, because the value of that particular item cannot be fixed. It keeps on changing. The market value of shares, that is the best example that has to be considered. If I own a company, I have invested my money in the shares of or shares in the share market, or if I have invested my money in the share market, the shares in which I have invested, the market value of that particular shares will not remain stable. It keeps on changes, it keeps on rise and fall. So for each rise and fall, I might either earn profit or loss, or I might earn income or expenses. So such items are considered under other comprehensive income. So anyway, other comprehensive income is classified into two main categories. First one, items that will not be reclassified to profit or loss. So what are the contents that comes under items that will not be reclassified to profit or loss? That mainly includes revaluation of property, plant and equipment, remeasurement of defined benefit plans, changes in the fair value of equity instruments, share of other comprehensive income of associates and joint ventures, deferred gains and loss on cash flow hedges, income tax relating to the above. The income tax relating to above is actually the second item. See, income tax relating to the above, that will not be reclassified to the profit or loss. So what are the items that will not be reclassified to the profit or loss? It's better to familiarize the items that comes under that heading rather than digging deep into that pattern. So instead of going in detail regarding each of these items, it is better to familiarize these items, because these items will be directly given under question. You have to identify this item and show it under the head. So anyway, these items cannot be included under the profit and loss items which we have done until now. So if there is any items, consider this, and if there is any tax relating to any of these incomes or expenses, it has to be shown here. Next one, other category is items that will be reclassified to profit or loss. So what are the contents that comes under item that will be reclassified to profit or loss? It includes change in the fair value of debt instruments, exchange differences on translation of foreign operations, deferred gains or losses on cash flow hedges, share of other comprehensive income of associates and joint ventures, unrealized gains or losses on investment, and second one, income tax relating to the above head. So these are items that comes under other comprehensive income. After that, total comprehensive income for the period and other comprising your profit and loss, other comprehensive income for the period. That is, before identifying or recording the other comprehensive income, you have already found out the profit and loss for the period. That is Roman number 13. So add this amount along with the other comprehensive income items. So you will get the total income for the period, or we can say total profit earned for the period, or we can simply say earnings of the concern. So here you will show the total earnings of the business. So these earnings, it has to be provided to the owners of the company. So who are the owners? We all know shareholders, and under shareholders also there is a category equity shareholders. So we have to distribute these items to the equity shareholders. So you need to identify what is the earnings per equity share. So next area you have to do is earning per equity share for continuing operations. Continuing operation means earlier I have mentioned that if the company is dealing with more than one ventures, one is in a continuous or a going concern pattern, another is in a termination pattern or a discontinued pattern, you have to identify the profit and loss of the continuing pattern as well as a discontinued pattern separately. So because earnings of these two situations will be different, so it has to be identified separately. First one, earning per share, how it has to be computed. There is two categories, basic and diluted. So the portion of the company's profit is allocated to each equity shareholders. That is known as basic earning per share. So the equation for finding out the basic earning per share, we can say earning per share, otherwise known as EPS. The equation is net profit available to the equity shareholders divided by number of equity shares. In simple terms, you will get an amount here. Show the amount in the numerator, and under denominator write down the total number of equity shares. It will be directly given in the question. So you will get EPS. That means basic EPS. That is a basic simple method of finding the earning per share. So here in the numerator you can see that net profit to the equity shareholder. So how we are going to find the net profit to the equity shareholder? I have mentioned that you can directly take this amount. You can directly take this amount if there is only one category of equity shareholders. That is one category of shareholders, that is equity shareholders. If there is more than one category of shareholders, that is if there is equity shareholders, apart from equity shareholders, if there is any preference shareholders or any convertible debentures or debenture holders, if there is those categories of persons in the business, you can't simply take this amount over here. For that you have to use another equation. Net profit to the equity shareholders is net profit you have identified from the statement of profit and loss minus any preference dividend. You have to provide dividend for the preference shareholder, because first preference is to be given to the preference shareholders, then only we can give the earnings to the equity shareholders, minus if there is any debenture interest that is mentioned in the question. These two items has to be dealt. Only after adjusting these two parties you can provide the earnings to the equity shareholders. So this is the equation for finding the net profit to equity shareholders. And first under earning per share or EPS there is two categories. One is basic EPS and one is diluted EPS. So basic is this one. So what is the meaning of diluted? The companies issue financial instruments such as convertible debentures. That is the debentures whose pattern will be converted during the course of its business. That is, the debentures may be converted into preference shares or equity shares after a certain period that is agreed upon between the company and the debenture holders. So when companies deal with convertible debentures or convertible preference shares, which can be easily converted into equity shares at any point of time or at the option of the holders, such financial instruments are called potential equity shares. So when company is dealing with potential equity shares, we cannot simply take the number of equity shares that is given in the question, because there will be another category of equity shares that is created because of the convertible preference shares or convertible debentures. So in that case you have to identify diluted EPS. So in order to find the diluted EPS, we have to find the net profit available to the equity shareholders, that is net profit minus preference dividend minus debenture interest. This is the equation for finding net profit to equity shareholder. Usually this equation will come only in the case of diluted, because in the computation of basic EPS, in that question there may not be any preference shareholders or debenture holders. That is convertible preference shareholders and convertible debenture holders, or preference dividend or debenture interest, like that. So if there is any diluted situation, in that case you have to be very careful regarding EPS. So first of all let us begin with the basic again, so as to remove confusion. If you are going to find the basic EPS, the equation is net profit to the equity shareholders divided by number of equity shares. So in that case, net profit to the equity shareholders, if there is no preference dividend and debenture interest, it will be easy. You can directly take the net profit. If there is preference dividend and debenture interest, you have to deduct the preference dividend and debenture interest from net profit and show here. Number of equity shares. Go through the question wisely. If there is any potential equity shareholders, that is any convertible preference shareholders or convertible debentures, if there is no such items given in the question, you can directly take the number of equity shares given in the question. But if there is any potential equity shareholders specifically mentioned in the question, you cannot directly take the equity shares, total number of equity shares directly mentioned in the question. You have to consider if there is any convertible preference shareholders given in the question, if there is any debenture holders, convertible debenture holders given in the question. You have to add these two items along with the number of equity shareholders given in the question in order to get the denominator number. I believe you have got an idea about the concept. In order to get a clear picture regarding how the EPS of basic and diluted has to be identified, we have to deal a practical case. So anyway, remember there will be two cases, basic and diluted. For the basic, the number of equity shares will be directly given in the question, but for diluted, you have to identify the total number of equity shares, total number of convertible preference shares, and total number of debenture holders. So earning per share for continuing operation, you have to find it separately. For discontinued operation, if it is given in the question, you have to find separately. And finally, add these two amounts and show here. So this is how a statement of profit and loss statement has to be prepared. Familiarize each of these heads, and in the practical situations you may not come across these discontinued operations. I cannot say that you will not come across. In almost all the cases there will not be any case situation regarding discontinued operation, but in the exam you might come across. So anyway, prepare for it, familiarize the statement, identify the contents under each of these heads, and we will discuss about the practical cases with regard to these statements in the coming sessions. Until then, go through it. If you have any queries regarding any of these areas, we will discuss about it.